Hello, Garland Nixon here with the one and only Laith Marouf, a guy that teaches us a lot every week. We learn what's going on in the Middle East, and we're probably going to learn a whole lot more today. Let's talk. Hello, Garland here with the one and only Laith Marouf, and as you can see, right, but well, it's not below his name today, but here's what we're going to do. We're going to show you the moral of this story. If you don't hear a word, even if our show gets cut off halfway through, freepalestine.video. That's what we're trying to accomplish today. Freepalestine.video. Look at that great website. Look at the video. I mean, where else are you going to get that kind of work, that kind of journalism done from the region? Freepalestine.video. As you can see, you can donate to Free Palestine TV. They got their latest episodes, field reports, military operations, all the stuff. You know, you go online and you're like, well, where can I find the good, the videos about what's happening? I understand they're on Telegram and maybe they're on X and maybe some of them have been taken down. Go to freepalestine.video. Share that on all your social media platforms, and importantly, it is critical that we keep it going. So you'll see the little box that says donate to Free Palestine TV, and on that it says one time or monthly. Become a monthly subscriber. Even if you can only do $5, $20 a month, that's fine. Become a monthly subscriber. It's important to keep that work going. Laith, how are you? Welcome back to my humble channel.
I'm really good. It's good to be with you, Garland. We've got a lot to talk about, and it's although story never ends. I think we're living every day surprises.
Yes. And so let's start here. I want to start here, and I think this is important, and it's very relative to the situation in West Asia and the Middle East. Osama bin Laden, he was the spirit warrior. The U.S., I remember at one point, there was one number of 300 million, which was a lot of money back in the 80s. That was many billions today, right? 300 million to him and his Mujahideen warriors to fight against the evil Russians. The Russians, it's always the Russians, right? And I think Laith is frozen again. He freezes every now and then.
Yeah, can you hear me at least?
Yeah, I can hear you. Every now and then it happens. I don't think it's an accident. Unit 8200, they're there trying to make a living too. But at any rate, all this money they spent on him, in the end, they put a bullet in him. In the end, he was of no longer value, and the empire did what it does to puppets, right? Sooner or later, the puppet was of no value. Heaven knows there's no shortage of imperial puppets in the Middle East. Your thoughts on the latest puppet who got humiliated, degraded, and ultimately they yanked the financial rug out from under him, Zelensky, with the latest debacle of the empire getting tired of a puppet. And of course, the story of Pinocchio, a puppet who thought he was a boy. That's him. He's a puppet, but he thinks he's a real leader. He thinks he's the leader of a country. He's the president of the country. He can say he's nothing but a puppet. And now they've taught him and then no money for you, nothing for you. In fact, Trump is humiliating the vassals in Europe, which they need to be humiliated, to be quite frank. I'm smiling to see all the vassals get humiliated so they can learn what we already know, that they're of no value to them. They're to be used and thrown away like toilet paper. Laith.
Yeah, I mean, I watched that whole press conference, almost 15 minutes of it, with Trump and J.D. Vance and Zelensky, and I don't think anyone on this planet has seen something like this before. Okay, it was very high value entertainment, that's for sure, and we all got our fill of the humiliation. We wish more that there will be more stupid vassals that come to the White House and try to open their mouth when they're being told to shut up. I mean, we saw a few weeks before the Jordanian king, and he had the smartness enough to stay quiet. Like, because if he like, when he started even hinting, the king of Jordan, to taking care of his own country, he could see the fire coming out of Trump's eyes, and he kept it quiet the rest of the press conference. But this guy Zelensky, I mean, he was an actor, he's a clown, and it got to his head that he's really fighting on behalf of Western quote unquote civilization, and that he's like the savior, right? And so I think he also watched the Netanyahu visit and trip, and thought that as a Jewish white guy from Ukraine, that he may have the good treatment that Netanyahu received, but he didn't understand that there's only one Jewish leader for the Jewish people that's allowed here around the world to do such. And here we go. He got the humiliation. Like, look, I am sure President Sisi of Egypt is counting his blessings that he never visited the White House in between the humiliation of King Abdullah and the humiliation of Zelensky. But yeah, like, all of these vassals are now probably looking behind their back all the time, wondering if they're going to be the next to be axed. And therefore, any smart vassal is right now trying to show, master in the White House that they are useful and they need to be kept. This is, I look at what the European leaders are doing, or what the Canadian, next Prime Minister, Chrystia Freeland, just by the way she blabbed, saying that the UK can provide a nuclear umbrella to protect Canada from Trump. This is actual words of a candidate in elections in Canada. It's lunacy. Obviously, there's more American troops and on Canadian territory than British troops or others already. Like, whether it's in the north, where the NORAD bases are, and there's more American jets, fighter jets, flying over Canadian airspace all the time than actual Canadian fighter jets. So it's just lunacy, and definitely the UK can't even protect itself, let alone protect Canada, if the United States wants to go this way. But truth of the matter is that the United States doesn't need to occupy any of these countries. It already owns them. The propaganda machine in the Anglosphere is all controlled from Hollywood and New York. There's no say really for even the propaganda machines of these countries. They cannot keep up with. They will not be able to. For instance, almost all the newspapers in Canada right now are owned by an American company. So what's going to be printed in Canada that's going to be in opposition to the United States? Zero. So but this was a moment of comedic relief. At least we can see that Zelensky went back to his roots, and acted like a clown. This is the best thing that he did since he became a president, I think.
The other thing is this: if you're a vassal, and this is important, I mean, for all that Trump is saying, the U.S. dragged Europe into this war. The U.S. set them up, dragged them into this war, impoverished them, blew up their pipelines, and stopped gas coming from them, right? I mean, if you're a vassal and you're sitting on the Gulf somewhere, or let's say Taiwan, whatever, the Philippines, right? You're looking at the U.S. was like, come on, we got to go into this war against Russia. In they go. And Germany's like, well, things are kind of expensive here. Screw you. They blew up the pipeline. You can't have that. You got to be poor, right? Just completely humiliate them, degraded them, dragged them into a war, and then woke up one day and said, that's not the way it happened now that we think about it. You dragged us into the war and took all of our money, and we want our money back. I mean, Trump comes in, and all of a sudden, we didn't drag them into the war. We didn't like take all their money and attack them and blow up their pipelines. They dragged us into a war and they did us dirty and they took all our money and we want our money back. And now they're literally saying to the vassals that we've impoverished, humiliated, degraded all of their they can't defend themselves from us or anybody else because we made them send all of their weapons to Ukraine to get blown up by the Russians. And now we're saying, well, not only are you poor, you got to buy all the weapons back from us. This is a humiliation that I don't know if it's with Rome, the Ottoman Empire. No empires have ever humiliated a bloc like what we're doing in Europe today. And if I'm in the Gulf states, I got to be looking and think, BRICS or anything's got to be a better option. Independence got to be a better option. Making a deal with the local guys got to be a better option. If this is my future, which it is, I might add.
Yeah, I mean, look, if any of these Gulf monarchs and or other Arab vassals have thought about it, they will be probably scared and wanting to figure out ways out. But unfortunately, for most of these monarchies in the Gulf, like the Saudis, the Bahrainis, the Qataris, the Emiratis, their whole entourage, whether it's their economic advisors or their political advisors or media advisors, they're all foreign agents. I mean, the special guard around MBS, they're all British and American. There's a whole unit of British special forces that are stationed in Bahrain to protect the king or prince of Bahrain. So these guys can't, play with their tail, okay, at all.
They're there to protect them, all right. Oh, they'll protect them unless they get out of line. Then that protection will turn inside out, I fear.
Yes. So unfortunately for these vessels, that even if they want to break line or suddenly, find sovereignty, and they're unable to. They'll be dead in a minute and taken out. And that's where I think the more clear this is to the populations in those countries, the bigger chance there is of return to revolutionary work and coups and what have you. I wish that Trump continues humiliating all his vassals this way.
Which he will.
Which he will, because he can't hold himself back, man.
He loves it. He loves to humiliate vassals.
Yes, he loves it. I mean, he gets punched left and right by the mainstream media in the U.S. that is still loyal to the old guard, and then he brings these guys and he stands them in front of them and shows the humiliation. And this is why I think even the mainstream media in the West is scared of being around Trump, because you saw him how many times he bashed CNN or NBC right there in the room and called them names, and they can't do nothing. So we're now in a world that is might makes right, where it's cowboy diplomacy, and anyone that is weak is going to be trampled on. And so God save the peoples of this world that can defend themselves. And we look at, of course, inspiration from the people in Lebanon and in Palestine and in Yemen that are refusing to bow down to imperialist machinations and are not scared to fight back. That's the only thing that you can do. Zelensky, if he really cared for his country, wouldn't have led himself down this path of trying to ethnically cleanse the Russian population of Ukraine on behalf of what the West wanted. His country, has some of the best farming lands in Europe. They have so much resources in terms of metals and heavy metals and precious metals and what have you, that all the vultures in Europe are right now trying to take control of, as well as Trump, obviously. And so it's his fault for going down this path. And if he wants to save his country, he should not even talk to Trump, by the way. He should just talk directly to President Putin and make up for the mistake of targeting the Russian population and get closer to his brothers and sisters in the Slavic civilization, instead of going and getting humiliated in Washington D.C. and or begging the Germans, the Nazis, and or the British or the French to come and help him against his brothers and sisters. If he sits down directly with President Putin and forgoes his hate towards the Russian people and reforges the brotherly relations between Ukrainians and other Slavic nations around them, there's Ukraine will flourish again, and it will become an important pivot point in the world at the doors between the Russian state and the rest of Europe that is going to be collapsing under the weight of all those economic sanctions and tax war that Trump has started. There's no way to save Ukraine by actually even sitting with Trump. I tell you that. Like, Trump is going to make a deal with Putin directly. He doesn't need to talk to Zelensky if Zelensky doesn't stand up as the president and directly speak to his neighbors.
Yeah, I agree. Look, there's two countries that Trump will respect: Russia and China, because they have the power to back it up. The only thing he's going to respect is power, and you ain't got power, he's not going to. And that's the way it works when you're in the world of vassalage. Nobody respects you. Speaking of countries that I respect greatly, before we get into some of the other big things, Yemen. There's no country in the world that I think, to me, has garnered more respect over the last several years than Yemen, because they don't have the resources and they don't have the money. But the one thing they had was determination, and they stood up. And to be quite frank, they humiliated the U.S. empire. Not just the U.S. French ships, British ships, all of these went to the Red Sea. They attacked them. They chased them away. They tried to bomb them. They done nothing. They grabbed the commercial ships if they wanted to. They closed the sea. What Yemen was able to do is, they defeated the U.S. Think of history. The British Empire ruled the seas. The U.S. Empire, they defeated all of them, and they barely have a neighbor. They just defeated them with their determination. What's happening with Yemen?
Yeah, the latest from Yemen is that they announced the new air defense system that is completely manufactured inside Yemen, and they called it Nasrallah. And of course, commemoration of Sayyid Hassan Nasrallah, the former leader of Hezbollah that got assassinated. And yes, I love the colors. Of course, red, white, and black are the colors of the Arabic Revolution. So this is one of many new weapons that they are coming up with. They said they have other new weapons that they will be bringing into service, but they're not going to release them yet to the public. But this new air defense system can shoot down any flying object at 75,000 feet height, which means that they can get almost any American jets or Western jets that try to penetrate their airspace. And we saw even before this new Nasrallah air defense system that they were able to shoot down something like 15, 16, 20. I've lost count of how many MQ-9 drones, as well as that F-18 Raptor that was shot as it was going down on the American aircraft carrier. So clearly they had capabilities, and now they have even more, which makes it that in the situation of a return to hostilities in the region, which is very, very likely that we will be back in full-scale war very soon, that Yemen would be much safer while it is trying to defend Gaza from any Western attacks through the air. And if they, looking at all the weapons that they've been releasing over the last 15 months, it's clear that their capabilities to also attack the naval assets of the West that will try to come and attack Yemen are growing by the day. So whatever missiles that they used to damage those 3 different American aircraft carriers, they have all the experience, and they have modified these weapons. They're going to be even more efficient in the next round of this war. And so Yemen is now ready. They said that if the Israelis breach the ceasefire in Gaza and don't go into the second phase of the ceasefire, that they will be relaunching their solidarity front from Yemen. And I think the Israelis are probably worried about that the most right now.
Well, by the time the ceasefire, or whatever so-called ceasefire happened, the Yemenis were able to strike at will. If you remember, towards the end, they could fire one missile. They could just fire one. They didn't have to fire like a barrage of missiles and drones to try to confuse and fool the U.S. slash Israeli air defense system. And let's not forget, people forget, a number of the vassalage countries along the way between Yemen would try to shoot the missiles down also. So they had an air defense system leading all the way up. They'd fire one missile, and that missile would go all the way in, defeat all the air defense systems, and strike its target. So I would be sure now that they have, because in this time, it's given them time to get many, many more arms. I'm sure they've got a lot more missiles, probably better technology, so they're probably well armed to defend themselves and to defend occupied Palestine. And it would not be a wise move for the Israelis to start this up again, because I suspect there's going to be some unfortunate surprises for them. The other thing I wanted to talk about was the cutoff of aid, which to me, this was determined by the UN. But I mean, like, you needed the UN to determine that it was a war crime, starving people to death. Like, we need lawyers to sit around and figure out that starving people to death is a war crime or a crime against humanity. But the war crimes have started again in Gaza. That's my understanding.
Yes, the Israelis blocked all the entrances to Gaza. They have not allowed any of the medical aid or the food or the gas to come into the besieged strip for the last 2 days. And right now, the 2 main water distillation centers in Gaza have ran out of fuel, so they can't actually even produce drinkable water. And this all happened because the Palestinians celebrated the first night of Ramadan with these mass dinners, or breaking the fast, that giving to the poor, and hung some decorations. And the Zionists, seeing just a little bit of happiness and joy in the eyes of the Palestinians, that really pissed them off. And how colonizers, how oppressors hate seeing joy in the oppressed population, in the indigenous population, and therefore they are now trying to starve the Palestinians during Ramadan. Obviously, there's a lot of conflicting messages coming out of the Zionist regime. We heard just a few hours ago the Foreign Affairs Minister Katz saying that they are negotiating phase 2 right now. A few hours before that, it was other ministers saying there will be no phase 2, that we're just going to end it. A few hours before that, we heard Netanyahu claiming that he wants to get rid of all of Hamas before stage 2 or the rebuilding of Gaza is allowed. So, and the Minister of Defense claiming that they're massing 500,000 soldiers on the borders of Gaza right now. So it's a lot of confusing messages coming out from the Zionist regime. And I think it's not only part of their propaganda scheme to confuse everybody what's happening, but also because they themselves don't know what the hell they want to do. are worried. They attempted this Trump plan of expelling the Palestinians from Gaza, and the vassals, or the West Bank, and the vassals, Jordan and Egypt, said, no, we can't do that because we will collapse. So now the Israelis, their only choice in front of them is either actually having a peace with the Palestinians there, or returning to the mass genocide campaign. That's the only way that they can guarantee that this colony can remain a Jewish supremacist majority colony. And so, but if they stop actually the war permanently, and have a prolonged ceasefire, that means that everybody within the Israeli state will get their comeuppance. You will have the internal investigations about what happened during the war, which will take down a lot of the generals and so forth. You will see a return to the court cases against Netanyahu and whatever. So, similarly in the West, if this war stops completely, we already are seeing encroachments of legal actions in the West against those who were involved in the genocide in Gaza. And very soon, if there's time, if there's peace, those court cases will be filed against many of the leaders of those states. There's already some filings being put against the Prime Minister of Australia, for instance. Soon there will be something against the French, German, UK, so on. And that all will accelerate if there is no war on the ground in Gaza and in the region. Therefore, it's clear that the interest of the elite in the Zionist colony and their backers in the West is not to have any reprieve from the slaughter. We need to continue slaughtering. And then at the end of the genocide, when there's no more Palestinians, yeah, you can cry about them and maybe drag a few people into jail. But as we see, this is the main aim, and in the West Bank is accelerating. That shows you how, in my opinion, all the arms deliveries that Trump also made over the last month, something like $50 billion worth of arm being delivered, is an indication that we are definitely going back to war.
Syria, that's a mess. It's interesting, the contradictions of empire and imperialism, wherein you've got these, liberals running around here. Oh, the Russians have, we lost Laith, darn it. Oh, well, hopefully he'll come back. He may have lost. What happens sometimes is he may lose his power, or he could lose his internet. So we'll hope he'll be back. We'll chat a little bit longer, and if he isn't able to come back, then we'll conclude. But what I was going to say was this: it's interesting that you got these liberals, and and I'm using the term liberals because I'm to the left of the liberals. Liberals now are fairly isolated, but running around saying, "Oh, the Russians have taken the eastern Ukraine and encroached on Ukraine, on the Ukrainians, and taken part of Ukraine," when in fact what they miss, or what they don't either don't know or don't say, is that the part of Ukraine that the Russians now have taken under, as Russia has annexed, are in fact Russian people, and that their language is illegal, that they're worshiping and their religion is illegal, and that they want to be under Russia. So even though the former Ukrainian people who are ethnic Russians want to be under Russia, it's somehow wrong for them to get their wish, to get freed from the attacks from these Nazis in Ukraine. So that's wrong. Oh no, this is terrible. The Putin Russians are annexing part of Ukraine that are oppressed Russians. But it's okay for Israel to attack Syria, to steal part of Syria, to occupy the Golan Heights for all of these decades, and now to take more parts of Syria to occupy that. And again, this is the contradictions of empire, because an empire by its nature is arbitrary and capricious. An empire is, here's the term, exceptional. which means everyone has to live by the rules. Everybody has to live by a common set of rules, except us. Tony Blinken called it the rules-based international order, right? Meaning we do what we want. So when it comes to Israel, when it comes to the Middle East, the U.S. can go 6,000, 5,000 miles away from the United States and then just tell people, this is what I want to do, and this is what I'm going to do, and this is what my vassals or alliances are, and this is what they're allowed to do. And even though you live there, and even though this is your home, this is your religion, this is your region, you don't have any right to make the rules there. You don't have a right to live as you please there. You don't have a right to worship as you please there. We'll put people in there and they can take everything you have. And that's the rules. Oh, by the way, when it comes to Europe, when it comes to Eastern Europe and Russia's border, we make the rules there. They can only do what we tell them to do. Oh, wait a minute. Let's go to Asia and Taiwan. They can only do what we tell them to do. How dare the Chinese people think that they can control access to the South China Sea? Now, that we can rename the Gulf of Mexico. We can literally rename the bodies of water to anything we want. We control them. We can rename them. We can patrol. We can do anything we want with the bodies of water in our region. But the Black Sea, the Russians, the Caspian Sea, the Russians have no right to make any claims over their own territory, the Sea of Azov, their own territorial waters. Well, there we go.
Yeah,
yes.
It's really weird. It was giving an error, cloud, the StreamYard unreachable. I tried, it's pretty weird. I sent you a screenshot of what they were telling me.
Yeah, I'm always suspicious, and I always suspect that someone's up to no good. But where were we? I forgot where
we were talking about Syria.
Okay, yeah, go ahead. We just got started on Syria. Well, I think that explains.
Yeah, I think
while you were there, I discussed the fact that the contradiction where the U.S. says that the Russians are encroaching on Ukraine and annexing part of Ukraine, even though the people in that part of Ukraine, former Ukraine, are Russians. Their language is illegal. Their worshiping is illegal. Wait a minute, this sounds just like the occupied Palestine. There we go. We keep losing Laith. I suspect that it's the subject we're talking about. So hopefully he'll be back. We'll look, when Laith gets back, I'll ask him to talk about Syria, and I'll stop running my yap because apparently we don't know how much time he's going to get. But we'll keep trying. But at any rate, yeah, but I think that's one of the big. There we go. All right, enough of that. Laith, talk about Syria.
So yeah, the Israelis are expanding their occupation zone. They're trying to occupy the whole border with Jordan all the way to the Tanaf area, where the American occupation base on the triangle between Iraq, Syria, and Jordan is. And there's the Quneitra or Golan Heights area, and then there's the Daraa province, and finally it's the Suwaida province. And Suwaida province is mainly Druze population, the Druze religion, and the Israelis were trying to claim that they're going to come to defend the Druze against the Wahhabi death squads. And there was demonstrations in Suwaida over the last 2 days, people burning the Israeli flag. For those who don't understand, the Druze population of Syria led at least their leaders were some of the main people that started the revolution against the French occupation between the two world wars. So these are Arab nationalists, Syrian nationalists, patriotic people. They're not going to be collaborating with the Zionist occupation. And in order to kind of trigger fear within this Druze population to somehow side with Israel, the Wahhabi death squads began a campaign of attacks on the Druze neighborhoods of Damascus city. The main one being Germana, just beside the airport of Damascus. And this neighborhood, Germana, is populated by the refugees from the Golan Heights from 1967 war, when the Israelis occupied it. So over the last 2 days, there's been clashes in Germana where the Druze militias took up arms and expelled the HTS, and the HTS keeps on trying to attack the neighborhoods. So this is all happening. Simultaneously, the Israelis did air raids on Damascus, on Aleppo, on Latakia and Tartus over the last 2 nights. And they again seem to be targeting neighborhoods and towns and villages in those regions that are picking up arms against the HTS. So we saw the attacks in Latakia and Tartus target specifically Alawite and Christian villages that have expelled the HTS over the last week. So we can see how this collaboration is working. The Israelis are doing kind of air defenses, air cover for the HTS when it's attacking parts of Syria that have revolted. But HTS is spread out too thin. It cannot control the country. Another thing that came out 2 days ago was somebody leaked a video of a meeting between the Israeli officials and HTS representatives in Europe. So now it's all clear for anybody who was stupid enough to believe that these are not agents of the Zionist and the West. HTS now have full proof in front of them. And the last story we need to talk about in Syria is the Kurdish Contras. 2 days ago, or in the beginning of, or at the end of last week, the leader of the PKK, the largest Kurdish militia, Abdullah Öcalan, who's in jail in Turkey, called for the disbandment of the military arm of the PKK and that they throw their weapons and to make up with the Turkish state. So for all those fools in the West, specifically the anarchists that believed in the fabricated country called Rojava or Narnia in the closet there, and thought that these Kurdish militias are going to bring democracy and women's rights and so forth. Here we go. It turned out that actually the fight between the Kurds and the Turks turned out to be turds, as we called it one time, right? It's a made-up fight between the vassals of the West that have been, their main goal and that has been set for them by the Western imperial powers is to fragment the Arabic people, fragment Arabic states, and turn them into chaos, as we saw in Iraq and Syria.
Yeah, I don't think this plot they have in Syria in the long run is going to work out well for Erdogan. I've said all along he's going to wake up one day and say, "Boy, this was a mistake." Let me ask you this: what are your thoughts on the status of Erdogan's control? I think this. Erdogan thought, I'm going to put my puppets in Syria, install my puppets in Syria, then I'll kind of own Syria, and then I can use Syria as leverage with the Russians. I can use Syria as leverage with the U.S. empire, et cetera, that he was going to have control of this thing. And I think he was fooling himself. And now that the deed is done and Assad is gone, he has nothing. But he thought he was going to have control. I don't think Erdogan has anything there, that he's not even really much of a player in some areas, but overall, he's not the player that he thought he was going to be. That the Zionists and the U.S. empire, but I repeat myself, have pretty much seized control of things. And it's just going to be a nasty fight. And they'll eventually get ejected also.
Yeah, look, the north of Syria, and specifically the coast, is very diverse. It's not homogeneous. You have the Alawites, the Christians, the Shia, and so for even during the height of the Ottoman Empire, this region, the coast of Syria, was a huge headache. Constant rebellion for 600 years. There's never been one decade during the Ottoman occupation of Syria that there was no rebellions. Okay, so now that he was given the north of Syria by the West, and the Israelis took the south, it seems like this is where the cut up between the two vassals is the piece of the pies that they're given. He's now having to deal with the same headaches that the Ottomans had to deal with. And believe me, even in the height of the Ottoman power, a lot of your viewers wouldn't know this, but because of those rebellions in the coasts of Syria and Lebanon, and in the mountains of Syria and Lebanon, the Ottomans made a siege and tried to starve the whole coast of Syria and Lebanon in the mid 1800s. Okay, and although the coast of Syria and Lebanon is mainly all these religious minorities, this led to a revolt in Aleppo and Damascus, which are supposed to be more homogeneous, Sunni, and the Ottomans thought that they had more sway over those populations. Actually, the Aleppo and Damascus revolted and by force broke the siege on Beirut, on Latakia, on Tartus in the 1800s, and brought food and clothes and everything. Okay, so the more the new Ottoman regime of Erdogan tries to hold on to the coast of Syria or try to starve and harm the population here, the more actually he will lose sway over the Sunnis in Aleppo and Damascus. This is history repeating itself, and anybody that doesn't learn history is doomed to repeat its mistakes. And only those who are full of hubris don't go and read history. So similarly in the south here with the Israelis, they think that because they are a part of the Druze population inside Palestine sold out, that somehow they'll manage to get the Druze of Syria also to sell out and join with them. They forget that the Druze of Syria in Suwaida, there's the mountain is called the mountain of the Arabs. They called it the mountain of the Arabs. The Druze see themselves more Arab pure of Syria. The Druze of Syria see themselves as the core of Arabism in the region. It's an opposite of what, let's say, the Israelis managed to do with the Palestinian Druze, separating themselves from the rest of the Arabic population. So I think both, while it was a huge loss to have Damascus fall to the HTS and Syrian state after being the bulwark of anti-imperialism, anti-colonialism for 80 years in the region, to fall and collapse this way. While that's all sad, there is right now the imperialists and their vassals have bitten more than they can chew. Syria is now a free for all, and at any moment, this war is gonna be directly. If the Zionists, for instance, re-engage in a war in Lebanon and in Gaza, all this overstretched military that they have now in South Syria and the Golan are going to be soft targets. They will be offed much easier than having to confront them in the battlefield of Gaza or in Lebanon. And I'm sure the Axis of Resistance is preparing for such a situation. Similarly, the HTS are out of their caves in Idlib that they dug in for 15 years. And now they're soft targets in the streets of the cities and villages, being offed left and right. So eventually, I think this is going to flip against, although it looks like a win for the Zionists, now it's going to become a defeat.
I think you're right. I also think it would be a terrible mistake for the empire to allow this thing to kick back up, because the resistance forces have had time to regroup. to do a lot of regrouping, to get a lot of weapons in, to get new kinds of weapons, to get new targets and fresh targets, and that they will be able to inflict a lot of damage in a hurry if it starts. I think it would be a mistake. Let me ask you this before we go. What's the state of what was the battlefield in South Lebanon? I saw something the other day where the Israelis had drone attacked some car and blew up a bunch of people. Hezbollah, I would imagine, is preparing in case they need to re-engage. What do we know about the state of things in South Lebanon and with Hezbollah, which we were told Hezbollah was done? Well, we were told Hezbollah was done, completely wiped out. Then the Israelis tried to engage them and got beaten back again. We were told that Hamas, 80% was destroyed, and as soon as it was over, they all pretty much came back out in brand new uniforms with brand new equipment. We were told they were out of equipment, out of everything. What's the state of what's going on in South Lebanon and with Hezbollah, as you know it, after Hassan Nasrallah's funeral?
Yeah, so you're right. There was today an attack by a drone on a car carrying a civilian in the south of Lebanon. There was another one a few days ago. So the Israelis continue to, once every couple of days, just commit these crimes for the hell of it. In terms of the resistance rearming and preparing itself for the next phase, that's every minute they're going as fast as possible. And I think the first stage of the reorganizing of the resistance in Lebanon was a survey of all the weapons, all the electronics, all the communication devices, because those supply chain attacks that the Israelis did on the pagers and the walkie-talkies, most probably there was other things that were also affected, but we didn't see it yet, or the Israelis didn't use those hidden, explosives or whatever they had, sabotage, electronic sabotage. So that Hezbollah has definitely spent the last 2 months going through all its caches of weapons, guided weapons, anything that could have any electronic interference in it or manipulation in the delivery of a chain, to make sure that nothing like that happens again. Right. So that was the first stage, while simultaneously, of course, reorganizing all its military structure and political structure and filling any gaps that are there. And finally, they have to, of course, look at learning the lessons from the first phase of this war, the 16 months, where Hezbollah, acted morally in its warfare, targeted only Israeli military.
We're having some issues with Laith today, but he's been able to come back. So we'll give him a few more minutes and hope he gets back. But it certainly sounds as though, and as I suspect, the U.S. empire, as dramatically overestimated the damage that they've done repeatedly to Hezbollah, repeatedly estimated the damage, as they always do. You can go back to Vietnam and they would make up numbers. They would get in a firefight and one enemy would one member of the NVA would die, and they would make up numbers. 100 are dead, 1,000 are dead, 50 are dead. It doesn't matter. So the U.S. has a long history of dramatically upping the numbers and increasing the estimates of the damages that they did to their enemy, not because they actually did the damages, but because the people on the battlefield needed to provide political cover for the people who were making their decisions. And of course, the people in Washington, D.C. needed propaganda to keep the Americans engaged. More often than not, if the Americans knew the amount of damage that wasn't being inflicted against their so-called adversary, and knew the amount of damage that was being inflicted upon American troops and or its proxies, the American people wouldn't support it. So we were told that as you might have seen some of the videos, we were told that Hezbollah was wiped out, and in fact, Hamas was wiped out, and in fact, that 80% of Hamas had been destroyed. That was the number that the Israeli government gave to the people of Israel. That was the numbers that it repeated, was repeated in the Israeli military, and oftentimes was repeated in the U.S. military. And then ultimately, what we would find is that upon the exchange of prisoners, the Hamas fighters came out, and when they came out, they were there by the thousands. Had they lost some people? Certainly, but it didn't seem as though that the damage was as significant as we were told. That it was a war that had lost people. And additionally, what we saw was, we were told that they were devastated, their tunnels were blown up, etc. But what we saw was the Hamas fighters were out in new, clean press uniforms with new equipment. And they were driving around in brand new SUVs, driving around in brand new vehicles. And there was a question as to where the vehicles came from. Who knows? With some of them, certainly some of them were captured from Israeli fighters and Israeli units in the area of Gaza. But clearly the damage that was done to the adversaries of Israel were not as significant as we had told via propaganda. Certainly, we were told that after the pager attack, after the killing of Nasrallah, after these things that were, yes, damaging, but also quite symbolic in nature, we were told that the damage estimates were, massive when it came to Hezbollah. However, when the Israelis re-engaged with Hezbollah on the border of Lebanon, they still were not able to make any headway. They had great losses, and they were, basically fought to a standstill. They were really unable to take ground. So what we're seeing is that what that really meant was, if the Israelis expected to take southern Lebanon, they were going to have to fight probably for years, and they were going to have to take foot by bloody foot and inch by bloody inch. And that they may still never get it, and that they were unable actually to stop the flow of weapons. They were unable to stop the fighting, the basically what I would call the warrior spirit of their adversaries. And now they have gone to Syria. They have, from the looks of things, spread themselves far thinner. And that, keep in mind something, and Scott Ritter talks about this when he comes on, for a military to take land. And think about taking the amounts of land. Let's say you take 100 kilometers. That's a lot. That's a lot of land. It takes a lot of soldiers to maintain that, to patrol that, to make sure that the enemy doesn't infiltrate, to make sure that your adversaries don't come in, go behind enemy lines, plant mines, do undercover operations, come in at night, kill people in the camp and sneak out, all these kinds of things, set mines and bombs and all that kind of stuff. So the number of Israelis, people look at Syria and say, wow, look at all of this land, and they took this part of Syria and that part of Syria. However, they already had lost a lot of soldiers, and it's going to take a lot of Israeli military personnel to maintain those pieces of land. So Israel has spread itself even thinner, which makes its soldiers and its military more vulnerable for attack. And that means that holding those lands in the event of a re-engagement with Hamas and or Hezbollah is going to present targets for adversaries, much easier and simpler targets. They won't only be able to target them in southern Lebanon and in Gaza. They now have a new area that they can engage them. And might I add, the other thing is this: what you have done now is you've brought a new fighting element, a new warrior element into the fray. So if the fight starts again, what you have now is a certain percentage of Syrians that feel that their land is occupied. They feel now that, okay, you've got those in Gaza who say, we feel that we're occupied and we have to defend our land against the occupiers. You have the people in southern Lebanon who say Lebanon is our country. The Israelis are trying to come and push us back. No, we're going to protect our land. But now you add to that a certain number of Syrians who will say, the Israelis are here in the U.S. and they're occupying a huge portion of Syria, and we're going to fight to eject them from our lands. So they've set themselves up in a far worse position than they were before. And if they re-engage, they will be fighting on a much larger front than they did And I don't think it's going to be easy. I don't think it's wise. I don't know if they're going to do it or not. The other part of it is this, and that is that the Trump factor, because this is a very, very difficult spot for Donald Trump, because notwithstanding a lot of things that Donald Trump does that I strongly disagree with, certainly. And if you know me, what I say is this: when it comes to politics, I don't care who's in office. I look at this big empire and I say it's an empire, and it's an empire that does what empires do. And right now, the empire's decided to make a right turn. It's come up to a brick wall in Ukraine and said, we got to make a right turn. It's come up to a brick wall in that the empire has to make a decision right now. And the decision is, do we go to full world war against Russia and likely China also? That was the path that we were on. The path that the empire was on was, we are losing the war. Our proxy is losing the war in Ukraine, and we're going to have to go after Russia. And it won't be proxy anymore. We'll bring the Europeans in, we'll bring the Americans in, at which point they're still going to be on the border of Russia. They'll be vulnerable to attacks from Russia, and Russia can easily flatten all of that stuff simply with surface-to-surface missiles. That if the U.S. sent in, let's say we sent in 100,000 troops, let's say the Europeans had 20,000, which wouldn't be easy, but let's just say we sent in 120,000 troops. We're still on the border of Russia, and Russia can just annihilate them with surface-to-surface missiles, and with Oreshnikov, which now is one hypersonic missile that we can't stop, that brings in 36 hypersonic missiles that basically vaporizes everything around it without even using nuclear weapons, right? So if the U.S., for the sake of argument, said, okay, we're going to go to war in Ukraine, and they send in 120,000 NATO soldiers, and what happens with them? When they get pulverized, they get obliterated immediately. They get, before they can even set up. I mean, if you're the Russians and you see the U.S. say we're starting to mobilize 100,000 troops and sending in ships and ships of troops to Russia, I mean, to Europe to fight Russia, and you see them start bringing in all this equipment on the border of Poland, do you sit around and wait for that to happen if you're Russia? No, you obliterate the ports, you obliterate all of it. You say, you know what, you guys are setting up to fight us. As Putin is a martial artist, and a martial artist, a person who knows self-defense, will say, I don't want to fight, but if I gotta fight, I need to strike first. Hey, I don't want any fight. I don't want any problems, sir. I don't want any trouble, but I'm putting my hands out. If you come within my hands, if I see you running towards me with a stick, am I going to wait till you hit me with the stick? You're running at me with a broom handle and you're going to try to hit me with it. Am I going to wait till you get there? No. I'm going to strike you. I'm going to attack you, knowing that you're going to attack me. I'm going to launch a brutal attack on you first. I'm not going to wait around. So, and I'm connecting all this to the Middle East. So the U.S. had to decide, we're going to go fight with Russia. And if they did, they were going to get obliterated. And then what now? Do you go to nuclear war? So the U.S. saw, at least in the Trump administration, we're heading towards nuclear war. We're heading towards really bad times. We got to make a right turn. We're going to make a turn. My point being here with Gaza, it also applies to Gaza, because do you go back to this conflict that really wiped out the Biden administration in so many ways? Morally, the world looked at the Biden administration and said, you people are knuckle dragging apes. You guys are animals. And my apology to knuckle dragging apes. But when people saw what the Biden administration were doing, they lost all moral credibility worldwide, destroyed any moral credit. Not that they had any, but what little claim they had to not being absolutely brutal, filth was gone. And the world looked at them and said, these people are nothing but war criminals. And they were abandoned by their base. They're abandoned, said, the world abandoned them and said, you people are horrible. You're war criminals and you need to be in jail. Okay. Trump came in and what did he say? Judge me by the peace that I make. Judge me by the wars that I end. Sure, hollow rhetoric, it's Donald Trump, but he's got to live with that. And what has Donald Trump come in? He's come in and before he got in, he stopped the main Gaza genocide. Now there's plenty to say he's still allowing the Israelis to do all kind of terrible things and supporting them on horrible things. But he did something there that the Biden administration didn't do. He stopped the principle of genocide. So he has a little bit of claim to doing something, a moral claim above the Biden administration. And then just, I mean, certainly we don't recognize much of it, but we were glad to see the genocide stop, as it were, right? Even though there's horrible things going on. And of course, he appears to be pushing towards a peaceful diplomatic resolution in Ukraine. So Donald Trump had some claim to being a far less warmonger, and some claim to, though, you know, those of us who are a peaceful nature only recognize, well, we're going to give credit where credit is due when it comes to the Trump administration, but we're also going to point to Gaza and say, hey, look, you're trying to get peace over here, but look at Gaza. Yeah, did you turn the volume down? Sure, but it's still, the volume is still on high. They're still killing people. Terrible things are happening, and you haven't leashed in your mad dogs that are running the. You haven't put a leash on your mad dogs that are running the Israeli government. You need to put a leash on these mad dogs. They're frothing at the mouth and they're killing people. Now, if Donald Trump allows this thing to start up again, the genocide to start up again, he owns it. And then Donald Trump now has to struggle with what moral credibility we'll call this, what little more moral credibility that he's been able to build in Ukraine, that he's been able to. You've got people in the US saying, oh yeah, you're doing good things. And, you know, as I said, and you've got people saying, now do that in Gaza. Now do that with Israel. People are saying, look what you did to Zelensky. You put him in his place. Good. Now do that with Netanyahu. So people are saying, I'll give you credit for this. You got a problem over here. What are you going to do with this problem over here? It's a terrible problem. You've got to address it. The last thing that Donald Trump needs is for this thing to flare up again. And now he's Joe Biden, war criminal part 2. And now people are no longer saying, well, Donald Trump, if you in this conflict and in that conflict, then maybe you can get the Nobel Prize for peace or whatever. As we all know, the Nobel Prize is just imperialist crap. But whatever the case, notwithstanding that, Donald Trump sits in a situation where what political strength that he's gathered, what political support that he's gathered as the quote peace candidate, right? But whatever claim he has to that, with some of us, when we look at the empire, you know, we understand empires are not peaceful, but whatever claim he has to that, and to saying my word was I'm the peace candidate and I want peace, Zelensky doesn't want peace, whatever strength, political support he's getting from that, outside of his MAGA people, outside of the MAGA people that say we'll support you no matter what, and even within the MAGA clique, there's a certain group of people that are peaceniks. You look, even within the MAGA clique, he's got the libertarians, and the libertarians don't want war in Gaza. The libertarians would be on his back and quick about that, saying, hey, we're libertarians. We don't like war. I'll give that to the libertarians, although I so dramatically, strongly disagree with them on economic policy. I respect the libertarians because for the most part, they're anti-war and they oppose war. Some of them, but you got to play the hand you're dealt. Anyway, but I suspect if the Gaza thing flows up, the libertarian contingent in his coalition of support, I guess that's the word, his coalition will start to fall apart. What Donald Trump doesn't want to do, when you look at Donald Trump's numbers of support right now, what Donald Trump doesn't want to do is, he's got good numbers of support. What he doesn't want to do is lose a big chunk of those because of one thing he does or another. Right now, he's already playing with fire. If he cuts Medicare and Medicaid and stuff, there's a lot of poor people in poor states who voted for Trump, who support Trump, who get Medicare and Medicaid and things of that nature, and they need that stuff. And if Donald Trump cuts their throat, he's going to lose a portion of that. He's going to infuriate people. So he's already playing with fire there. But he has a significant part of his coalition that says we're anti-war and we supported Donald Trump because we don't want wars. And I know people like that. I know people who are lefties like me. Now, I didn't vote for Trump, of course. I didn't vote for, God knows I'd never vote for the Democrats. But my point is, I know people who are anti-war people who literally voted for Trump and said, well, Biden's going to kill us all. Okay, so Trump politically here, and this is important because Donald Trump is very cognizant of his need for domestic support. Donald Trump, I think, focuses on domestic politics, and even his foreign policy is directly related to his domestic policy. That with Donald Trump, all of that is about his domestic policy. And as an entertainer, he's keenly aware of the need for him to maintain the support of the audience. Right, an entertainer, he sees the coalition of supporters he has as an audience. And Donald Trump, let me give you an example of how he understands this. One of the people that he appointed, he said, well, this person's kind of left, sure, but you may say this person's kind of left, but the unions supported me and I got to give them something. Well, he screwed them with the National Labor Relations Board, but he gave them something. But he understands at least you got to do something to try to hold your coalition together. The worst thing that could possibly happen to Donald Trump, the thing that could discredit everything that he's done to address the Ukraine conflict, the thing that could discredit him morally, claiming that he's the guy of peace and he's the guy who's working towards a peaceful world. He's working with the Russians who have roundly condemned the Israeli genocide. He wants to talk to the Chinese who have, roundly condemned the Israeli genocide. The countries that he wants to talk to, that he wants to work with, if he goes back to being Joe Biden, and the Israelis just starts blowing up and slaughtering civilians and dropping bombs on tents and in the industrial capacity that they did before, that he can't make any excuses at all for an outright open murderous genocide. That puts him in the position now that the International Criminal Court starts saying we're going to start bringing up this genocide stuff again, and people are going to the International Criminal Court. And Donald Trump now has to send his people to the ICC and to the UN to say, nah, we're going to protect genocide. If Donald Trump does that, man, it would be devastating. It would be devastating for his presidency. And I don't think Donald Trump wants to see that happen. Not that it will or won't. I don't know. We shall see what happens. I'm just saying this. I think Donald Trump is keenly aware of the importance of maintaining his coalition of support at home. And I think he's keenly aware of the inclinations of his domestic audience. I think he's as a guy who is an entertainer, I think he's very much aware that he has taken a position. He is, as an actor, right? He's playing a part, and he's playing that part, and the part is I'm the peacemaker, and that if in fact this thing starts up again and the Israelis go berserk again, that his role as a peacemaker will be blown, and he won't be able to play it anymore. It's over for that if he allows this to happen. So we shall see what happens. We can only hold cross our fingers and hope for the best. Someone said, how's the inflation rate? I also think that's something that Donald Trump, one of the things that Trump wants to do in a big way, Donald Trump wants to get a deal with the Russians because the Russians got a lot of oil. Donald Trump wants the price of oil down. Now, the price of oil is dropping right now. I'm sure he's happy about that. He wants to get some stability and in the oil market and find a price that the Russians and the Saudis can live with. That's one of the reasons they met in Saudi Arabia. He wants an oil price that the Russians and the Saudis can live with. That's low enough, high enough that they can live with it and maintain it. That's low enough that it helps to lower the inflation in the U.S. and helps to shore up his coalition by people who say, Donald Trump could say, I came in and look what I did. I worked to end this, to bring peace, and I worked to lower inflation. And he understands that lowering energy costs is a significant part of that. So that's my thoughts on inflation and his plans around inflation. At any rate, thanks a lot, everybody. Look, don't forget, buymeacoffee.com is a great option if you're able to support the channel. It just says like buy Garland a coffee, $5. However many you want. And of course, on there, if you choose to, it can say, do you want to make this monthly? It's right there on buymeacoffee.com. So you can do that. Certainly, there's Patreon, become a Patreon member, PayPal, Cash App, however you can afford to help the channel is certainly appreciated because this is what I do, right? We all got to eat, and this is what I do, and it helps me to be able to continue to bring you this content as best I can. Also, please share this on all your social media platforms. And whether you can afford to, contribute or not is irrelevant. If you can afford to contribute, great. If you can't, hey, I understand. You got to feed your family, do what you got to do. But you can at least share this on all your social media accounts. You can subscribe. You can like. And also now look for that little join button. It's starts at like $3.99 a month or something like that. How much is that? You can join and become a member of this channel. So please, you can do that. That's $3, $4, $5 a month. I think you can choose how much you want. So please, if you can afford it, click the join button, become a member of the channel. But most importantly, share this on all your social media platforms. My Rumble channel is growing. I'm very happy about that. So please, because hey, they may throw me off YouTube on any given day. So become a member of my channel. Thank you very much. Have a wonderful day. Share this on all your social media platforms. Peace. I will be where I gotta go. Oh, wait a minute. I got to do Rick Sanchez's show at 11:30. I'm going to do his show. I don't know where that is, on Rumble or wherever, but whatever the case may be, I will be back. Let's see. We got Mark Sloboda coming up this week. We got Matt Weinglass. He's great coming up. We're going to talk some. Matt Weinglass is he's a Hollywood guy, and we're going to talk about the old woke Oscars. That ought to be fun. That's going to be Wednesday at noon Eastern Standard Time. So we got things going on. Lots of stuff going on. Thanks. Have a great day. I'm out.